Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome to today's program Mike Finn, who's VP of Transportation at the Kenco Group. And today we're going to talk about the transportation market. Are we heading into unprecedented territory? You know, if you've been to any logistics conference over the past few weeks and months, or if you just try to cover a load, over the past few weeks, you know that the tide is starting to turn in the transportation market. Rates are going up, capacity is starting to tighten. Will these trends continue in 2018? What impact will the ELD mandate have on rates and capacity moving forward here? And how should shippers respond in light of all of this? Well, those are just some of the questions that we're going to discuss in today's episode. And obviously, Mike is in the front lines of all this in his role there at Kenco. So it's great to have him on the program to kind of share his perspective and his insights and advice on what to expect and what actions to take in the weeks and months ahead. So, Mike, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Adrian. Excited to talk about this topic. A lot, very, very impactful to our customers. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. We always like to say here, Talking Logistics, that we try to, talk about topics that are, timely and relevant and important. And I think this whole, everything that's happening in transportation is certainly timely, relevant, and important for a lot of our listeners and watchers and certainly for a lot of your clients as well. Before we dive into the program, Mike, you're a first-time guest here on Talking Logistics. We've had many of your colleagues on the program before. But like I like to do whenever we bring someone new onto the program is just kind of learn a little bit about their background, how and why they got involved with supply chain logistics to begin with. So why don't you briefly tell us a little bit about your career path, again, how and why you got involved with supply chain logistics and what your current role and responsibilities are there at Kenco?
Yeah, long-time caller, long-time watcher, first-time caller. So happy to be on here, Adrian. And been in the industry 20 years. Started out at JB Hunt Logistics as an account rep. Really learned the fundamentals of the industry. When JB Hunt Logistics rolled into Transplace, I was fortunate enough and proud to say that I was one of the initial alumni there at Transplace. So I was there 15 years, worked in a variety of operations and sales roles. Joined Kenco 5 years ago. Kenco is a full-service 3PL. I lead the transportation division. We have over 250 Kenco drivers across the country. We also offer a transportation management solution that complements our logistics division, our warehousing division, as well as our customer supply chain needs. So happy to be here. And it's incredibly tight market, Adrian, as you said, that 5-to-1 truck ratios, $2 a mile plus spot price. It's really, really remarkable times.
Yeah, no, it is, and we'll kind of get to maybe at the end whether we are truly, entering unprecedented territory here. You gave out some data points there, which was going to kind of lead into my first question here. There's never a dull moment, in the transportation market. There's a lot of buzz and concern today, again, around rates and capacity. So what's, what are you seeing and hearing, from the shippers and carriers that you work with?
I think a lot of people have underestimated the impact of the hurricanes. I think I was just at the CSCMP conference, I guess in September, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I heard one of the speakers talk about the aggregate equipment loss. 50 to 70,000 units are taken out of service from. Just think about flooding, think about brake damages, think about recertification of that equipment. So you take 50 to 70,000 units out of the market, there's going to be a reaction. And certainly FEMA entering the market as well. They have the mandate for critical goods to buy transportation, so that has an impact, and you're certainly seeing it now in the load boards and in the spot pricing.
Now, do you expect do you expect that to have continued impact, moving forward here, or do you see that kind of resolving sooner rather than later?
I do. I think we'll see it 4 to 6 months. Certainly September was remarkable. October is strong. I think as the ELD mandate comes out in December, we're going to see another uptick, a tightening. When traditionally you see it maybe soften in the first quarter, I think it's going to be a very strong, remarkable market for 4 to 6 months is what most people are looking at.
So, when you look at, I think a lot of folks are looking at what's happening in the spot market as an example. I mean, what are you seeing there? I mean, that seems to be something that's kind of like an early indicator that, a lot of the routing guides are getting exhausted, if you will, and people have, shippers have to go out to the spot market. So there's a lot more demand going on in the spot market, right?
Yeah, those of us in the transportation industry always can always tell when the economy is really kicking. You can see the GDP is going up, 3.1% just a few weeks ago. It's always an early indicator. We are seeing a sustained $2 a mile, north of $2 a mile spot price. So traditionally, there's a pretty good gap between contracted rates and spots, and it's very narrow right now. It's actually spot maybe slightly above contracted rates. So usually you could go get some savings for our customers to the spot market. I think right now customers are really looking to lock it in, looking to get creative, looking at dedicated fleets. How can they mitigate the risk? How can they scenario plan? So we're seeing all of the above approaches to really offset this.
Yeah, so I'm going to touch on that a little bit later in terms of what action shippers should take regarding what's happening here. I think the other area that a lot of folks are talking about now, and it's been going on now for over a year, is the whole electronic login devices mandate, the ELD mandate. I know we did a couple episodes on the topic last year, and the thought was, well, carriers have got about a year to prepare, right? And now we're basically at the 11th hour here with enforcement set to begin in December, and there's still a lot of unanswered questions about will this significantly impact capacity and productivity. I mean, do we have any clear answers yet, or any indications of what might happen?
I wouldn't say that yet the data is real clean on that subject. I think there's a lot of opinions. We did have one poll recently where I think it was 900 carriers were polled, and 31% of them claimed to be ready for the ELD impact. So that's alarming if you stop and think about it. If only 31% of the carrier force is ready, and again, that's one of the few data sources that I've been able to find. Owner operators have fiercely fought this. It's obviously a differentiator between a large fleet and owner operator fleet. They fiercely fought it. They're going to have to become compliant by April, is when the government will start taking them off the road. So there will be an impact. It's hard to say how substantial it'll be, though, Adrian.
It seems to me that there is a difference between kind of large carriers and smaller, carriers. It seems like most large carriers are already complying, and they've been so for quite some time, but obviously they represent a relatively tiny percentage of the overall market. The vast majority of the transportation market are folks with less than 6 trucks, right? And I think that's the segment of the market, which is the majority of the market, that there's a lot of uncertainty around, right?
Yeah, no question. I was talking with one of our key customers recently about the impact on transit days. If you're running across the country with a smaller carrier, you may be able to do that in 5.5 days. But if you're going to do that with legitimate ELDs, you're going to probably be closer to 6 days. So there's going to be some consequences, some slower transit times, maybe a little bit closer to rail on some of those long-term, longer haul lanes. So, we at Kenco run a very safe fleet, been recognized by the ATA as one of the safest fleets on the road the last 3 years. Very proud of that, and safety's paramount to everything we do at Kenco, and most of I would say most of the truckers across the country are, safety is paramount, but the ELD will certainly have an impact starting in December, have an impact on capacity, and then by April, I think you'll continue to see it tighten as these carriers come online.
Right. And I think, a lot of the carriers I know that I talked to, or that I heard speak at different conferences, particularly those smaller owner operators, I know, last year at this time, early part of this year, some of them were waiting for, some of the illegal action that was being taken to see if they can, suspend the mandate or overturn it. And it seemed like all those legal options kind of ran their course, by the end of the summer here. So, I guess the big question now is whether, those folks that were on the sidelines waiting, how many of them will say, okay, now I guess we don't have a choice, we have to, or some of them will say, you know what, I'm out of the industry. I guess, absent some clear indication, I guess we're just going to have to, wait and see, right?
Yeah. I mean, you look at the rebuilding effort occurring in Texas and Florida, how many of those drivers, owner operators will, go into that competitive, labor force. So you're right. I think what time will tell how it all unfolds. It kind of reminds me of the Y2K, rush there for us veterans around 2000, when people were trying to get their AS400s ready for Y2K. there was a rush for those software providers. I think, as the ELD mandate comes out, the providers that provide that technology, I think, certainly very busy. We've talked to a few of them, very, very busy right now.
Right, right. Yeah, no, and I think from a shipper standpoint, I think you almost have to plan for the worst and hope for the best, in some ways. And I think this is getting a little bit into kind of what's going to be my last question, but in some ways you almost have to ask that what if question, right? What if X% of capacity exits the market, or if productivity is diminished by X%, what impact could that potentially have, and maybe simulate those scenarios on their network and see what options they should take, right?
Yeah, I mean, you look at just the hurricane impact, you look at really just market balance. When the hurricanes occurred, it was, you could say, at equilibrium. Hurricane really tipped it into where the supply and demand, truck to load ratio was inverted. And now you've got the ELD that you're folding on top of it. So I think it is smart of our customers to sit down and talk about the what ifs. I think the best prepared supply chains need to have scenarios. What about dedicated fleets? How do you let relationships? You've hopefully have developed strong relationships with your carrier base year over year, and you've had a long-term perspective with them. And without trucks, America stops, and people that don't believe that are really finding that out right now. So have a long-term look. Really look at dedicated fleet. Some of the largest shippers in America have come to Kenco recently and said, I want security. I want dedicated fleets. How can I have a pop-up dedicated fleet 2025, dedicated Kenco drivers or a partner carrier to mitigate this risk?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I hear the same thing in terms of shippers kind of exploring some of those options. So we've kind of talked to some of the different trends that are impacting the transportation market. Certainly the economy, and we're heading into Q4 right now, busy holiday season, all that. That's always going to have an impact. Strengthening GDP growth. We'll see what impact that will have going into 2018. The ELD mandate, right? Hurricane, the residual effects of the hurricanes, those have all had impact as well. The other thing that you can't avoid talking about when you talk about the transportation market is, talking about, driver availability and fuel, right? What trends are you seeing in those areas, and how will they impact the market moving forward?
Yeah, it was just driver appreciation week just a few weeks ago, and I think what by and large what they said was just respect us on the road. The executive teams, you can say thank you, but what we want is for America to appreciate us, give us respect, become a preferred shipper. That's something that we can really offer the industry with and we have over 90 warehouses across the country operate transportation into and out of their of our customers' warehouse. And really preferred shipper is the takeaway. Treat the driver with respect, have break rooms. As the ELD comes on, as hours of service is really enforced, those drivers, earn money by being on the road and running. So we need to treat as a country, we need to treat our drivers with respect, get them into and out of the facilities. And from just a driver recruiting perspective, it's remarkably tight. We at Kenco have had historically less than 25% turnover. We treat our drivers with respect. We get them home on time, and I think that's really a recruiting advantage to us. But by and large, the over-the-road fleet, those drivers continue to churn. They have options. Fuel is certainly a variable that everybody's got a plan for. It's come down recently. It did spike there during the hurricane in Texas and Florida, but it's certainly come down, and that's certainly a scenario that you have to plan for.
Yeah, no, a lot of variables there. I know I've seen recent data where, to your point, kind of the turnover rate, is starting to go up again. Yeah, the driver turnover rate, across the industry. So that's a troubling, trend there for sure. Certainly a lot of discussion around the carriers. We saw over the past, a couple of years, a lot of the trucking companies increasing, driver pay as a way to, not only attract new drivers, but also retain them. I think it'll be interesting to the point you brought up before, with all the rebuilding activity that is undoubtedly going to take place in, Texas and Florida, heck, maybe even in Puerto Rico, some folks may want to, camp out there and get some good work out there. That certainly construction and driving has always been in competition with each other. So that might add some additional pressure on driver recruitment and retention.
Yeah, the rate structures for sure to entice those drivers to stay into the industry, and likewise the builders out there are going to entice the drivers to come into their industry. So it certainly is more pressure. It's another variable that we do have to consider when talking with our customers about how to be prepared for where we are today and how this market will unfold over the next 4 to 6 months and longer than that.
Right. So, as a way to wrap up, Mike, I mean, I'll ask you what I've been asking, other folks that have, insight into what's happening in the market. I mean, if I'm a transportation executive at a manufacturing or retail company, I mean, what should I be communicating up to, upper management today about what's happening in the transportation market? And, more importantly, what action should I take to prepare effectively?
Yeah. Well, so start with the plan, right? You've got to really have a plan to measure to engage your clients, engage your carriers. There's a balance between rates and service, and hopefully you've appreciated that over the years, because I think all of that is going to come to bear now. So capacity plan, scenario planning, how can you mode shift? How can you maximize your trailers? How can you buy less footprint on a trailer from a carbon footprint? How can you do less multi-stop, and in general, just have a capacity plan that is mindful of all of your objectives as a supply chain.
Now, do you see opportunities here for? I mean, one of the things that I know have been talked about in the past, and I've seen good case studies throughout the years, but I think it's something that's still a missed opportunity for many shippers is, enhanced collaboration not only between shippers, right, for co-shipping, co-loading, right, collaborative shipping, if you will, and obviously, logistics service providers such as yourselves are in a good position to help facilitate that or enable that, but also better collaboration internally between transportation and packaging, right? How can we fit, and even product design, how can we fit more product per case, more cases per pallet, right, and then as a result, more pallets per truck. Right. And I think you've seen case studies throughout there where, companies have been able to, increase the number of product that they've been able to fit in a truck just through better packaging design and better product design. Are any of your clients, or have you seen any of that activity take place with some of the companies you work with?
Yeah, I certainly was able to do that in my past, where we were able to come out of Mexico with some appliances and some tile. So, opposites attract. It was a great, I think you might have had that on your session, one of your very first sessions, Adrian. So that's a great example of where you had a very heavy, dense tile, and you wanted to find something that fit on top of it. So we found appliances to counter to get 80% of the cube and 80% of the weight. Each shipper had to give up 20% to get 80% of the cube. So dramatic savings. It was a great footprint carbon reduction for that customer. Customers, actually 5 customers collaborated. And that's a great example of what you can do. How can you think outside the box? How can you collaborate together? That took us partnering with a carrier. It took us partnering with the boxcar, the KCS. It took us partnering with the interior of Mexico, cross-border, partnering with the receivers, 2 different receivers, one in Missouri and one in Pennsylvania. So a lot of coordination, but at the end of the day, was the right thing to do for those shippers, right thing to do for those carriers, right thing to do for the environment, right thing to do for capacity. So instead of barely 50% reduction in footprint north to south out of Mexico to the U.S.
Yeah, no, I think, from my standpoint, whether we're, if we are indeed entering unprecedented territory here in the transportation market, we have to, think and take action that is perhaps not unprecedented in the industry, but perhaps unprecedented in your particular company. If you've been resistant to collaborative shipping, if you've been resistant or haven't been, broken down the silos between packaging and transportation and product design, that's another opportunity there. Because I think we ultimately have to, in my opinion, have to work smarter in order to address, these challenges. It goes beyond just, trying to, and obviously better collaboration between the shippers and the carriers, more, honest and ongoing discussions and data sharing, between all the parties. But I think it's all of the above in order to really respond effectively to what's happening out there.
Yeah, transparency is something that I've learned, and I'm sure throughout your career. But when we were pursuing the co-load opportunity, transparency was paramount, right? You had to be transparent to each shipper. You had to be transparent as a 3PL, as an integrator. But you also be transparent to the carrier and to the governments about the concept. Without transparency, deals die. And as you collaborate, that is really a principle of collaboration. And I've learned is you got to have transparency, you got to have integrity, and just really have the end in mind. But it does have to be a win-win-win. It's an overused term, but collaboration, that's really what's required.
Right, right. No, I absolutely. And I think along with transparency is honest and ongoing, communication, between all the parties. I mean, obviously having you on the program as a logistics service provider, I think LSPs have, great insight into what's happening in the market, what's happening across industries, because you kind of sit in the middle there and you're working with various, shippers in various industries. Obviously, you've got a pulse on the carrier market as well. So what I always tell shippers is, leverage, the knowledge and insights that your 3PL partners have, because they can provide you with perhaps greater visibility and transparency in terms of what's happening out in the marketplace than perhaps you can see just relative to your own, operations. And I think that that's another, approach that shippers ought to take, is really leverage, the trading partners and the knowledge that they bring to the table as well. Well, Mike, we're kind of out of time here for today, but like I always say at the end of our episodes, we always just manage to scratch the surface on the topics we talk about. And certainly when it comes to transportation, we could probably spend 2 hours talking about all the different dimensions of what's happening in the market and different actions that shippers could take. But I think you provided some great insights and advice for shippers. And certainly I think we'll try to touch base again in Q1 or Q2 of next year and see where we're at, and see what, if indeed we've entered unprecedented territory in 2018. So, Mike, thank you again for making the time for being with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Adrian.
And thank you to those of you that joined us. If you are watching this episode on demand, either at the Kenco website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or comment for Mike, you can post it there, and I'm sure that he'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you all for joining us, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.